Samuel Trevor thought it was over, the second Rose stopped moving. He stood there in the snow, convinced the cold would finish what his fists started until he felt it, footsteps behind him, and the sudden realization that the worst part of the night hadn't even begun. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. Rose Morgan's blood hadn't frozen yet when Samuel Trevor decided the night was finally quiet enough to leave her behind. He stood over her crumpled body, flexing his bruised knuckles, feeling the ache settle into bone. The deserted highway stretched endlessly in both directions, no headlights, no witnesses, just snow and darkness, and the kind of silence that makes men believe they're untouchable. Should have just let it go, Samuel muttered, though Rose couldn't hear him anymore. She lay face down on the icy asphalt, one arm twisted beneath her torso, the other stretched outward like she'd been reaching for something that never came. Her dark hair fanned across the road, dusted white with fresh snow. Blood pooled near her temple where her skull had cracked against the ground, dark against pale skin, steam rising in the frigid air. Samuel crouched beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck. The pulse was there, weak, thready, barely clinging. Good enough. He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans, his breath fogged in sharp bursts. The cold bit through his leather jacket, but he barely felt it. Adrenaline still hummed through his veins, electric and righteous. She'd brought this on herself. All those months of questioning him, doubting him, threatening to tell people the truth about things she didn't even understand. "I'm done protecting your secrets, Samuel." That's what she'd said, standing in her apartment doorway like she had any power at all, like she knew what those words would cost her. Samuel glanced down at Rose's still form. Her red flannel shirt was torn at the shoulder, her jeans soaked through from the snow. One boot had come off during the struggle, lying a few feet away like discarded evidence. The cold would finish what his fists started. Hypothermia worked fast at these temperatures. He'd looked it up once, years ago, after a hunting trip went wrong. 28 degrees, wet clothing, unconsciousness. She had maybe 90 minutes before her core temperature dropped too low. Maybe less. By morning, she'd be another tragic headline. Local artist found dead after vehicle breakdown. Authorities would piece together a story: car trouble, attempted walk for help, exposure. Nobody would question it. Nobody questioned frozen bodies in Minnesota winters. Samuel walked back to his truck, boots crunching through the snow. He paused at the driver's door, looking back one last time. Rose hadn't moved. The snow was already beginning to cover her, gentle and inexorable, like the earth claiming what belonged to it. He climbed into the cab, engine roaring to life, heat blasted from the vents. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the steering wheel, not from guilt, but from the adrenaline crash. He'd never hit anyone that hard before, never felt bone give way beneath his knuckles, never watched someone crumple like their strings had been cut. It had been easier than he expected. The headlights swept across Rose's body one final time as he shifted into drive. For a moment, her face caught the light, eyes closed, lips parted, snow collecting in her dark lashes. Then the truck turned, and she disappeared into the darkness behind him. Samuel pressed the accelerator. Red taillights glowed briefly in the rearview mirror before the swirling snow swallowed everything. The road curved into forest, and within seconds, the scene vanished completely. Gone. Done. Over. He exhaled slowly, feeling his heartbeat settle. His phone buzzed in the cup holder, probably his brother, wondering where he'd disappeared to. Samuel ignored it. He'd figure out an alibi later. For now, he just needed distance. The highway unwound before him, empty and dark. Pine trees pressed close on either side, their branches heavy with snow. No other vehicles, no houses, nothing but wilderness and the certainty that he'd gotten away with it. Samuel allowed himself a small smile. Nobody knew Rose was out here. Nobody was coming. He'd made sure of that. Behind him, Rose Morgan lay motionless on the frozen road. Her phone was shattered 6 feet away, screen dark, useless. The temperature gauge on the nearest gas station read 28 degrees and dropping. In 90 minutes, hypothermia would claim her. In 2 hours, her heart would stop. Snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, covering her body inch by inch. The road remained empty, silent, the kind of silence that feels permanent. But something moved in that silence. Headlights appeared in the distance, not from the direction Samuel had gone, but from behind. From the stretch of highway Rose had traveled before Samuel forced her off the road. A black vehicle emerged from the darkness, moving slowly, deliberately, not rushing, not hesitant. The headlights swept across the abandoned road, catching the reflective markers, the snow-covered asphalt, the dark shape lying crumpled on the frozen ground. The vehicle stopped 30 feet away, engine idling, headlights illuminating Rose's still form. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the low rumble of the engine, the whisper of falling snow, the terrible stillness of a woman dying alone. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out tall, composed, wearing a long black coat that hung open despite the cold. Dark hair, sharp features, the kind of face that revealed nothing. He stood beside the vehicle, surveying the scene with the patience of someone who'd expected to find exactly this. Theo Smets had been following Samuel Trevor's mistakes for months. Tonight, the mistakes had led here. He began walking toward Rose, boots crunching through snow. Not running, not panicked. His movements carried the weight of inevitability, like watching a door close that had always been meant to shut. The headlights cast his shadow long across the road, stretching toward Rose's body. Steam rose from his breath. Snow collected on his shoulders. He stopped beside her, looking down at her unconscious form with an expression that might have been calculation, or might have been something harder to name. Then Theo turned, very slowly, looking back down the empty highway. In the direction Samuel Trevor had disappeared, and in that moment, standing alone on a frozen road with a dying woman at his feet, Theo Smets made a decision that would unravel everything Samuel thought he'd buried. The night wasn't over. It was just beginning. Rose's first thought wasn't pain. It was cold, the kind of cold that felt like drowning, like being pulled under dark water where sound became distant and movement turned sluggish. She tried to open her eyes but couldn't remember how. Tried to move, but her body had become something foreign, disconnected, refusing every command. Somewhere far away, she heard breathing. Her own? Someone else's? She couldn't tell. Snow touched her face, soft, persistent, melting against skin that barely registered sensation anymore. Each tiny impact felt like a whisper telling her to let go, to sink deeper into the numbness spreading through her limbs. Her mind grasped for something solid, a memory, a reason to fight. Samuel's face, twisted with rage, his fist connecting, the world tilting, asphalt rushing up. The memory arrived fragmented, edges blurred. She'd been leaving, finally leaving. 3 years of walking on eggshells. 3 years of apologizing for things that weren't her fault. 3 years of watching herself shrink smaller and smaller until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Tonight, she'd tried to take herself back. "I'm done protecting your secrets, Samuel." She'd said it standing in her doorway, car keys in hand, overnight bag already packed. She'd said it because she thought she was safe, thought he wouldn't follow, thought the restraining order she'd filed that afternoon would matter. She'd been wrong about all of it. Rose's lungs burned with each shallow breath. Something inside her chest felt broken, grinding against itself. Ribs, probably. Maybe worse. She'd taken a first aid course once, years ago, back when she still believed knowledge could save you. Back when she thought being careful meant being safe. Flail chest, punctured lung, internal bleeding. The terms floated through her consciousness like debris from a shipwreck. She tried to move her left arm. Nothing. The signals from her brain died somewhere between intention and execution. Her body had stopped listening, stopped cooperating, stopped caring whether she survived the next 60 seconds. Panic fluttered weakly in her chest, a bird with broken wings. Move. Get up. Crawl. Do something. But her muscles wouldn't respond. She was trapped inside herself, a passenger in a vehicle careening toward oblivion with no way to grab the wheel. The cold intensified. She'd grown up in Minnesota winters, knew the progression. Numbness first, her fingers and toes already gone. Sensation retreating inward like her body was abandoning its extremities to save the core. Then the shivering would come, violent and uncontrollable. Then confusion. Then the final stage, the cruel warmth that made hypothermia victims strip naked before they died, convinced they were burning up as their bodies shut down. She wondered which stage she was in now, wondered if she'd feel herself cross into the last one. Rose's thoughts drifted to her apartment small, cluttered with half-finished paintings, smelling of turpentine and coffee. She'd been working on a series about metamorphosis, butterflies emerging from cocoons. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent months painting transformation while trapped in a relationship that was slowly killing who she used to be. Who was I before him? She couldn't remember anymore. Samuel had taken so much her confidence, her friends, her sense of safety in the world. He'd done it slowly, methodically, the way water erodes stone. By the time she realized what was happening, she'd already lost pieces of herself she couldn't name. And now he'd taken the rest. Somewhere in the distance, a sound, an engine maybe, or whined through trees. Rose's fading consciousness couldn't distinguish between real and imagined anymore. Everything blurred together, memory and sensation, past and present, fear and acceptance. She thought about her mother, dead for 15 years. Wondered if this was how it felt at the end, this strange peace settling over terror. Her mother had gone quietly, cancer stealing her breath inch by inch, until there was nothing left to take. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have been stronger." But what good was strength against men like Samuel? Men who smiled in public and raged in private. Men who apologized with flowers and promises before their fists found skin again. Men who made you believe you deserved every bruise, every cruel word, every moment of fear. Rose had tried to be strong, tried to leave 6 times before tonight. Each time, he'd found a way to pull her back. Threats, tears, promises of change that lasted exactly long enough for her to unpack her bags. This time she hadn't told him she was leaving, hadn't given him the chance to manipulate or threaten. She'd filed the restraining order, packed her car, and driven. He'd found her anyway, because men like Samuel always did. Her breathing grew shallower. The pain in her side dulled into something almost bearable, not because it had lessened, but because her body was running out of ways to register suffering. Everything was shutting down, systems failing one by one, like lights going dark in a house nobody lived in anymore. "This is how I die," Rose thought distantly, alone on a frozen road because I finally tried to save myself. The injustice of it should have made her angry, should have ignited some spark of rage, some final burst of will to survive. But she was so tired, tired of fighting, tired of being afraid, tired of carrying the weight of Samuel's violence like it was something she'd earned. Maybe it was easier to let go. Maybe the cold was a mercy. Snow accumulated on her eyelashes, her hair, the corner of her mouth. Her breath came in barely, their whispers. The road stretched empty and endless, and Rose Morgan felt herself slipping away from it, from everything, into darkness that promised an end to hurting. Then, footsteps, close, real, crunching through snow with deliberate weight, not running, not panicked. Rose's dying consciousness registered the sound but couldn't process its meaning, couldn't separate hope from hallucination. Her brain was shutting down, inventing comfort where none existed. The footsteps stopped. Someone knelt beside her. And in that moment between life and death, Rose Morgan sensed something impossible. She wasn't alone anymore. Theo Smets didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in patterns, in consequences, in the inevitable collision between actions taken and debts owed. He believed that men like Samuel Trevor always left trails sloppy, arrogant trails because they never imagined anyone was watching closely enough to follow. Samuel had been wrong about that. Theo knelt beside Rose Morgan's unconscious body, his coat brushing snow-covered asphalt. Up close, the damage was worse than he'd expected. Her face was swollen on the left side, purple bruising already blooming across her cheekbone. Blood had dried in her dark hair, matting it against her skull. Her breathing was shallow, irregular, the kind of breathing that preceded not breathing at all. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck. Pulse weak but present. Core temperature dropping fast. Maybe 30 minutes before irreversible damage. Maybe less. Theo's jaw tightened. He'd been tracking Samuel for 3 months, watching, documenting, waiting for the right moment to collect what was owed. Samuel had been stealing from people. Theo protected, skimming money from accounts he thought were invisible, telling lies to dangerous men who didn't forgive being made fools of. Small crimes that added up to significant debt. But this Theo looked down at Rose's broken form. This was different. This wasn't about money or business or the careful mathematics of underworld justice. This was rage. This was personal. This was a man who'd lost control and left a woman to freeze because he was too much of a coward to face what he'd done. Theo stood slowly, surveying the scene with professional detachment. Rose's shattered phone, the single boot lying separate from her body, the tire tracks where Samuel's truck had turned around. The story wrote itself clearly for anyone trained to read violence. Samuel hadn't planned this. The location was wrong, too exposed, too close to the main highway. This was improvisation born of anger, not calculation. Which meant Samuel was panicking, which meant he'd make more mistakes. Good. Theo walked back to his vehicle, boots leaving deep prints in fresh snow. The black sedan idled quietly, headlights still illuminating Rose's body like a stage spotlight. He opened the rear door, retrieved his phone, and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "I need a medical team," Theo said without preamble. "Discreet. Head trauma, possible internal injuries, severe hypothermia, 20 minutes from my location or she doesn't make it." The voice on the other end asked no questions. Coordinates were given. ETA confirmed. Theo ended the call and made a second one. "Find Samuel Trevor," he said. "Don't approach. Just watch. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, every mistake he makes between now and sunrise." He hung up before waiting for acknowledgement. Theo returned to Rose's side, removed his coat, and laid it carefully over her body. The gesture was practical body heat retention, slowing hypothermia, but something in the way he arranged it, ensuring her face was covered from the falling snow, suggested a consideration that went beyond mere pragmatism. For several moments, he simply stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her labored breathing. Snow collected on his shoulders, his dark hair, the sharp angles of his face. The cold didn't seem to touch him. He stood like a man accustomed to waiting in places others fled from. Rose stirred slightly, not waking, but some deep survival instinct causing her body to shift. A soft sound escaped her throat, something between a whimper and a sigh. Her fingers twitched beneath Theo's coat. "Easy," Theo said quietly, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Help is coming." He checked his watch. 17 minutes until the medical team arrived. 17 minutes to keep her alive. Theo crouched again, this time gently repositioning her head to keep her airway open. His hands were steady, efficient, the movements of someone who'd dealt with trauma before. He checked her pupils with a small flashlight from his pocket, sluggish response, but responsive. Checked her breathing too shallow, checked the blood on her temple clotting, but the injury beneath was significant. She needed a hospital, proper medical care, warmth and time, and things Theo couldn't provide alone on a frozen road. But hospitals meant police. Police meant questions. Questions meant investigations that could expose connections Theo preferred to keep buried. He'd have to work around that. Movement caught his attention, headlights in the distance, approaching from the south. Theo's hand moved instinctively toward his waist, then relaxed. The vehicle slowed as it neared, a pickup truck with rusted panels and a cautious driver. It rolled to a stop 30 feet away. An older man climbed out, wearing a heavy coat and confusion. "Everything okay here?" Theo stood, positioning himself between the stranger and Rose. "Car accident. Help is already on the way." The man squinted through the snow, trying to see past Theo. "That girl looks hurt. Maybe I should—" "Your help isn't needed." Theo's voice remained level, but something in his tone, in the way he held himself, made the man take a step backward. "Right. Okay. Just trying to help. I understand. Drive safe." The man hesitated, looked once more toward Rose's concealed form, then climbed back into his truck. He drove away slowly, glancing in his rearview mirror until the darkness swallowed him. Theo waited until the taillights disappeared completely before returning his attention to Rose. 14 minutes. He knelt again, checking her pulse, weaker than before. Her lips were turning blue despite the coat covering her. Theo removed his suit jacket, added it to the layers over her body. His dress shirt offered little protection against the cold, but he didn't seem to notice. "Stay with me," he said, his voice quiet against the whisper of falling snow. "Don't give him the satisfaction." Rose didn't respond. Her breathing grew more labored, each inhale a visible effort. Theo placed his hand against her neck, monitoring her pulse with his fingers. It fluttered beneath his touch, fragile, fading, a life held together by threads that were fraying one by one. He'd seen men die before. Watched the light leave eyes, felt the final breath rattle through broken bodies. He'd caused some of those deaths himself, when circumstances demanded and mercy ran out. But this was different. Rose Morgan hadn't earned this death, hadn't played the games that led men to frozen roads and final reckonings. She was collateral damage in Samuel Trevor's spiral toward consequence, and Theo Smets didn't allow collateral damage. Not anymore. 11 minutes. In the distance, barely audible over the wind, came the sound of approaching sirens. Samuel Trevor made it 37 miles before his hands stopped shaking. He drove through the darkness with his headlights cutting tunnels through falling snow, radio off, heat blasting, mind racing through the details, alibi first, then cleanup, then the careful performance of normalcy that would carry him through the questions that might never come. Because nobody knew. Nobody saw. He'd made sure of that. Samuel pulled into a truck stop off Highway 61, parking beneath flickering fluorescent lights that turned the snow purple. Inside, he'd grab coffee, maybe food, establish a timeline that placed him nowhere near that frozen road. His phone showed 1:14 a.m. Perfect. He'd say he'd been driving all night, heading to Duluth for a weekend fishing trip. Nobody could prove otherwise. He climbed out of his truck, stretching muscles still tight with adrenaline. The parking lot was mostly empty, a semi idling in the corner, a sedan with Minnesota plates, a motorcycle covered in snow. Normal, quiet. Samuel walked toward the entrance, rehearsing his story. Then he stopped. A black vehicle sat in the shadows near the exit engine running, headlights off, the kind of car that cost more than Samuel made in a year, the kind that didn't belong at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Probably nothing. Rich guy stopping for gas. Wrong turn. Samuel continued toward the door. Samuel Trevor. The voice came from behind him, calm, measured, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being heard. Samuel turned. A man stood beside the black sedan, tall and composed in the falling snow. Dark hair, sharp features, expensive clothes that somehow looked wrong in the fluorescent glare, too refined, too intentional. He wore a dress shirt despite the cold, no coat, like the temperature was merely a suggestion he'd chosen to ignore. "Do I know you?" Samuel kept his voice casual, but his heart rate kicked up. The man walked closer, movements unhurried. "No, but I know you." Something in those words made Samuel's stomach drop. Not the words themselves, but the certainty behind them. The kind of certainty that came from knowledge, not assumption. "Look, I don't know what you left Rose Morgan on Route 47. The man stopped 6 feet away. "Approximately 40 minutes ago. You checked her pulse, confirmed she was alive, and left her to freeze." Samuel's blood went cold, colder than the night air, colder than the fear crystallizing in his chest. "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie came automatically, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. The man tilted his head slightly, studying Samuel the way someone might study an insect pinned to a board. "Your hands are bruised. Your right sleeve has blood on the cuff. You're 20 miles past your apartment, driving in the wrong direction, and your story about Duluth won't hold because you didn't pack fishing gear." Samuel looked down at his hands, knuckles purple and swollen, at his sleeve dark stain he'd somehow missed, evidence he'd been too arrogant or too stupid to notice. "Who the hell are you?" "Theo Smets." The name landed like a punch. Samuel had heard it before, whispered in bars, mentioned in careful conversations by men who dealt in cash and favors. Stories about a man who moved through the underworld like smoke, who settled debts quietly and permanently, who never needed to raise his voice because his reputation did the screaming for him. Stories Samuel had dismissed as exaggeration. Urban legends told by small-time criminals trying to sound dangerous. Looking at Theo Smets now, in the flesh, Samuel understood every story had been an understatement. "I didn't." Samuel's mind scrambled for traction. "Whatever you think happened. I think you've been stealing from the Bellamy accounts for 6 months. Theo's voice remained conversational. "I think you've been skimming profits from deliveries you were trusted to transport. I think you've been telling lies about people who don't forgive being lied about." Samuel's throat went dry. The Bellamy accounts. Christ, he'd been so careful, taking only small amounts, covering his tracks. "How did— And tonight?" Theo continued. "I think you decided Rose Morgan knew too much about your business, so you eliminated the problem. She's my ex-girlfriend, not— She passed information to an accountant 3 weeks ago." Theo's expression didn't change. "Copies of invoices you thought she'd forgotten about. Details about shipments that didn't match manifests. She didn't know what she was giving away, but you did. That's why you followed her tonight. That's why you panicked." Samuel felt the world tilting beneath his feet. Rose had talked to an accountant? Given away his paperwork? When? How? "I want you to understand something," Theo said, taking one step closer. "I've been watching you for months, Samuel. Watching you steal, watching you lie, watching you make enemies of people who take enemies very seriously. I've been patient because the debt you owe takes time to calculate properly. Another step. But tonight, you hurt someone who had nothing to do with your crimes. Someone who was only guilty of knowing you. And that Theo's voice dropped lower, quieter, somehow more terrifying in its restraint, changes everything. Samuel's hand moved toward his pocket keys, phone, anything but Theo's gaze stopped him cold. If you run, I'll find you before sunrise. If you call the police, I'll ensure they discover every crime you've committed since you turned 18. If you try to finish what you started with, Theo paused, letting the implication hang in the frozen air. You won't get close enough to try. What do you want? Samuel's voice cracked. I want you to understand that this story is over. Your version ends here. What happens next depends entirely on whether Rose Morgan lives or dies. Is she? Samuel stopped himself, but too late. Theo smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made Samuel's skin crawl. You're wondering if she's alive, if someone found her, if your mistake is reversible. He took one final step, close enough that Samuel could see the absolute coldness in his eyes. She's alive, Samuel, despite everything you did to make sure she wasn't, and now you're going to live with what comes next. Theo turned, walking back toward his vehicle with the same unhurried confidence he'd approached with. Where are you going? Samuel called out, his voice desperate. Theo opened his car door, looked back over his shoulder, to watch you understand what consequence feels like. Then he was gone, the black sedan pulling away into darkness, leaving Samuel Trevor standing alone under fluorescent lights with blood on his sleeve, and the weight of his mistakes finally catching up. The medical team arrived without sirens. 2 vehicles, a dark SUV and an unmarked van pulling onto the frozen road with practiced efficiency. 4 people emerged, 2 paramedics, a doctor, and someone Theo recognized as one of Dr. Keller's trauma specialists from the private clinic downtown. No questions asked, no paperwork. No official records that would trigger investigations, exactly as Theo had requested. How long? Dr. Keller knelt beside Rose, already assessing vitals with swift, practiced movements. 43 minutes since I found her, Theo said, pulse weakening, breathing shallow, core temperature critical. Dr. Keller worked quickly, IV line inserted, heated blankets wrapped, oxygen mask secured. Her team moved like choreographed dancers, each person knowing their role without needing direction. Possible skull fracture, multiple rib fractures, internal bleeding likely. Dr. Keller looked up at Theo. She needs surgery. Soon. Can she be moved? She'll die if we don't, Theo nodded. Take her to your facility. Keep her off the grid. No police notifications until I say otherwise. Dr. Keller hesitated. If she doesn't make it, she will. Theo's voice carried absolute certainty, as if he could will it into being. Make sure of it. They loaded Rose into the van with mechanical precision. Theo watched until the vehicles disappeared into the darkness, red tail lights swallowed by falling snow. Then he stood alone on the empty road, studying the scene Samuel had left behind. Blood on asphalt, tire tracks, a single boot, the shattered phone. Evidence of violence, evidence of abandonment, evidence of a man who thought he could erase someone and walk away clean. Theo retrieved the phone, careful not to disturb the screen fragments. Even damaged, it might yield information. Messages, call logs, the digital footprint people never remembered they left behind. His own phone vibrated. He answered, Talk. Samuel's at the Pine Ridge truck stop off 61. The voice belonged to James, one of Theo's surveillance specialists. He's been standing in the parking lot for 6 minutes. Looks spooked. I know. I just left him. Silence on the other end then. You talked to him? I wanted him to know. Theo walked back to his sedan, phone pressed to his ear. I wanted him to understand this wasn't random, that someone's been watching, that consequence has a name. Risky move, boss. Samuel Trevor is a coward who hits women and steals from people he thinks won't notice. He's not smart enough to be dangerous. Theo climbed into his car. But I need everything on him. Not just the Bellamy accounts. Everything. Who he talks to, who he owes, where his money goes. And I need to know exactly how Rose Morgan became involved. Already working on it. Found something interesting about 3 weeks ago. Rose visited Mueller and Associates downtown. Accounting firm. She was there 90 minutes. Theo's jaw tightened. Why? Still digging. But Mueller handles the Bellamy portfolio. And they've been flagging irregularities in Samuel's shipment records for months. The pieces started connecting. Rose hadn't been just Samuel's ex-girlfriend. She'd been his liability. The person who could unknowingly expose his crimes simply by answering questions honestly. Find out what she told them, Teo said. Every detail. On it. Also, Samuel's brother called him twice in the last hour. Left voicemails. Want me to pull the audio? Yes. And put eyes on the brother. If Samuel runs to family, I want to know. Theo ended the call and sat in the darkness, engine idling, heat blasting against the cold. His mind worked through scenarios, calculating probabilities, anticipating Samuel's next moves. Samuel would panic. Men like him always did when they realized the walls were closing in. He'd either run stupid but predictable, or he'd try to cover his tracks by eliminating evidence, which meant Rose needed protection even after she woke up. If she woke up, Theo pushed the thought away. Dr. Keller was the best trauma surgeon in the state, discreet and expensive. If anyone could save Rose, it was her. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Package delivered. She's in surgery. Will update in 3 hours. Package. As if Rose Morgan were cargo instead of a woman bleeding out because she'd made the mistake of trusting the wrong man. Theo opened his contacts, found a name he hadn't called in months. The line rang 3 times before connecting. Smets. The voice was rough, heavy with sleep. Do you know what time it is? I need everything on Rose Morgan. 28 years old, artist, lives on Riverside. Last known employment at the Copper Gallery downtown. Why? Detective Hayes sounded more awake now, suspicious. Because she's in my protection now, and I need to know who she is beyond what Samuel Trevor tried to destroy. Silence. Then, Trevor, that piece of work who's been running deliveries for the Bellamy operation? The same. What did he do? What men like him always do. Theo's voice was flat. He took his anger out on someone smaller, someone who trusted him, someone who couldn't fight back. Hayes exhaled slowly. Where is she now? Surgery. Off the books. She survives. She'll need protection. He knows she talked to Mueller and Associates. He knows she can connect him to the irregularities in the Bellamy accounts. Christ. She stumbled into the middle of your investigation? She didn't stumble. She was used. Theo watched snow accumulate on his windshield. Samuel thought she was just his ex-girlfriend. Thought she'd keep his secrets because that's what victims do. But she didn't. She talked. And tonight, he tried to erase that mistake. You want me to bring him in? Not yet. I want him scared. I want him making mistakes. I want him to understand that running won't save him, and neither will silence. Smets, Hayes' tone shifted. Cautionary. Whatever you're planning. I'm planning to make sure Rose Morgan wakes up in a world where Samuel Trevor can't touch her again. Everything else is just logistics. Theo ended the call before Hayes could argue. The snow continued falling, covering the blood on the road, erasing the evidence of violence the way time erased everything eventually. But Theo remembered. He cataloged every detail: the position of Rose's body, the defensive wounds on her hands, the boot lying separate like a marker of struggle. Samuel had made this personal when he left her to die. Now Theo would show him what personal really meant. Samuel Trevor sat in his truck for 27 minutes before he found the courage to move. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, mind replaying Theo Smets' words on an endless loop. She's alive, despite everything you did to make sure she wasn't. Alive meant witnesses. Alive meant testimony. Alive meant every lie Samuel planned to tell would crumble the moment Rose opened her mouth. He needed to think. Needed to fix this before it spiraled further out of control. Samuel pulled out his phone, stared at the screen, then put it away. Who could he call? His brother would ask too many questions. His friends were liabilities. The people he worked for, the Bellamy operation, they'd kill him themselves if they knew how badly he'd screwed up. He was alone with his mistakes, and they were multiplying faster than he could contain them. The smart move was to run. Empty his bank accounts, drive south, disappear into a city where nobody knew his name, start over. Forget Rose, forget the Bellamy money, forget everything that had led to this frozen parking lot and the realization that he'd gambled his life on a hand he couldn't win. But running meant admitting defeat. Running meant Theo Smets won. Samuel's jaw clenched. He started the engine. Theo stood beside Route 47, exactly where Rose had fallen, waiting. The snow had stopped. The sky was clearing, revealing stars that turned the landscape into something almost beautiful if you could forget the violence that had happened here hours earlier. The blood was covered now, buried under fresh powder. By morning, there would be no visible trace of what Samuel had done, but Theo didn't need visible traces. He checked his watch. 3:47 a. Samuel had left the truck stop 18 minutes ago, driving east. James was tracking him remotely, watching his movements through GPS and traffic cameras, feeding coordinates to Theo in real-time updates. Samuel's heading back toward the city. Speed increasing. He's running. Theo's phone buzzed with the message. He smiled without humor. Not running. Not yet. Samuel was the kind of man who needed to see something, to confirm it with his own eyes, before he believed it was real. He'd come back to the road. He'd check whether Rose's body was still there, whether evidence remained, whether the story he'd tried to write had actually ended. Theo knew men like Samuel, knew their patterns, knew how predictability made them easy to corner. Another text. He's turning onto 47, heading your direction. Perfect. Theo walked back to his sedan, killed the headlights, and positioned the vehicle across the road, not blocking it entirely, but creating an obstacle impossible to ignore. Then he stepped out and waited in the shadows, letting the darkness swallow him. 3 minutes later, headlights appeared in the distance. Samuel's truck approached slowly, cautiously. He slowed further when he saw the sedan, coming to a full stop 50 feet away. The engine idled. Samuel didn't get out. Theo stepped into the road, illuminated by the truck's headlights. Samuel's brake lights flared brighter, fight-or-flight instinct kicking in. Then the driver's door opened. Samuel climbed out, trying to look confident, trying to reclaim some illusion of control. "You following me now?" Samuel called out, voice carrying false bravado. "No, I'm waiting for you." Theo walked closer. "I knew you'd come back. Men like you always do. You need to see the scene. Need to confirm the story ended the way you wanted." Samuel's hands clenched into fists. "I don't know what game you're—" "This isn't a game, Samuel. This is consequence." Theo gestured to the empty road. "You came back to check whether Rose's body was still here, whether anyone found her, whether the cold did what your fists couldn't. You're insane." "I'm precise." Theo stopped 10 feet away. "I chose this location specifically. No traffic at night, no witnesses, no security cameras within 3 miles. The nearest house is 4 miles east. If someone screamed here, nobody would hear them." Samuel took a step backward. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining context." Theo's voice remained level, conversational. "You thought this road was empty by coincidence. It wasn't. I've been directing your movements for weeks, Samuel. The jobs you took, the routes you drove, the people you trusted, all of it calculated to bring you here, to this moment, where you finally understand how thoroughly you've been outmaneuvered." The color drained from Samuel's face. "That's not possible." "The delivery to Cloquet 2 weeks ago? I arranged it. The late-night pickup last Thursday? Mine. The accountant Rose visited?" Theo smiled coldly. "I sent her there. Gave her just enough information to ask the right questions without understanding why." Samuel staggered slightly, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. "You used her. I protected her. There's a difference." Theo's expression hardened. "You were stealing from people who don't forgive theft. I needed proof. Rose provided it without knowing. She was safe until you made her a target. I didn't. You beat her unconscious and left her to die." Theo's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Don't insult us both by pretending otherwise." Samuel's breathing quickened. His eyes darted around the empty road, calculating odds, measuring distances. Theo could see the desperation building the moment when cornered animals stopped thinking and started clawing. "Sit down, Samuel." "What?" "Sit down." Theo pointed to the ground. "Right there, in the snow." "I'm not." Theo moved. Not running, not rushing, just closing the distance with frightening speed. Samuel tried to react, tried to raise his hands, but Theo's palm struck his chest precise, controlled, and Samuel's legs buckled. He dropped to his knees in the snow, gasping. "I said sit." Theo stood over him. "You're going to stay right there while I explain exactly what happens next." Samuel looked up, fear finally replacing arrogance in his eyes. "Rose is alive," Theo continued. "She's in surgery. If she dies, you die. Not quickly, not mercifully. You die the way you made her suffer slowly, in the cold, knowing nobody's coming to save you. Please. If she lives, you answer for everything. The theft, the violence, the lies. You confess to the Bellamy operation. You return every cent you stole. You disappear from Rose's life so completely she forgets you existed. They'll kill me if I confess." "Yes." Theo crouched down, eye level with Samuel. "But that's better than what I'll do if you run. Because Samuel," his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, "I will always find you. Always. And when I do, You'll wish you'd taken your chances with them. Headlights appeared in the distance, 2 vehicles approaching from the east. Samuel's eyes widened. Who's that? People who've been waiting for permission to collect what you owe. Theo stood. This is the moment, Samuel. The moment you decide whether you die a coward or whether you face what you've earned. The vehicle stopped. Doors opened. 3 men emerged, large, silent, purposeful. Samuel looked up at Theo, all pretense finally stripped away. What did you do? I balanced the scales. Theo walked toward his sedan. Everything else is just gravity. The 3 men moved like shadows given substance, deliberate, unhurried, carrying the weight of professional violence barely contained beneath pressed suits and impassive expressions. Samuel recognized one of them, Victor Bellamy's enforcer, the man who handled problems too delicate for police involvement. Problems like theft, like betrayal, like loose ends that talk too much. Samuel tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Fear had locked his muscles, turned his bones to water. Wait, Theo. Please, we can work this out. Theo paused at his sedan, hand on the door. He didn't turn around. You had months to work it out, Samuel. Every day you stole, every lie you told, every time you chose cowardice over accountability, those were opportunities. You spent them all. I'll confess. I'll tell them everything. I'll return the money. Yes, you will. Theo finally looked back, his face illuminated by the sedan's interior light. But not because I'm giving you a choice, because it's the only path left that doesn't end with your body feeding the woods before sunrise. The enforcer, a broad man with Slavic features and hands like concrete blocks, stopped in front of Samuel. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His presence said everything words couldn't. Samuel's breath came in ragged gasps. This isn't fair. Fair? For the first time, emotion cracked through Theo's controlled facade. You beat a woman unconscious, left her bleeding in the snow, hoped the cold would erase your mistakes like she was nothing more than an inconvenient witness. And you want to talk about fair? Theo walked back toward Samuel, each step measured, controlled, dangerous. The 3 men parted to let him through. He crouched down again, close enough that Samuel could see the absolute coldness in his eyes, the kind of cold that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the absence of mercy. I've killed men, Samuel. Men who deserved it less than you do. Men who made cleaner mistakes, who showed more courage, who faced their consequences without begging. Theo's voice was barely above a whisper, forcing Samuel to strain to hear. Do you want to know why you're still breathing? Samuel nodded frantically. Because Rose Morgan is still breathing. Because somewhere in a surgical suite, a doctor is fighting to keep her heart beating, her lungs working, her brain functioning despite everything you did to stop them. Her survival is the only thing standing between you and a shallow grave. Theo stood, brushing snow from his knees. So here's what happens now. You're going to get in that vehicle. He pointed to the black SUV idling behind the 3 men. You're going to drive to the Bellamy warehouse. You're going to confess every theft, every lie, every cut you skimmed from their operations. You're going to return every cent you can access and sign over everything you own to cover the rest. They'll kill me. Probably. Theo's expression didn't change. But Victor Bellamy is a businessman first. He might decide your debt can be worked off. Might decide you're worth more alive than dead. That's between you and him. And if I refuse? Theo glanced at the enforcer, then back to Samuel. Then you don't leave this road. And tomorrow, when hunters find your truck abandoned with blood on the steering wheel, everyone will assume you ran. Assume guilt caught up with you. Assume the cold or the wolves or simple cowardice finally claimed you. The enforcer's hand moved to his waist, where something metallic glinted in the starlight. Choose, Samuel. Theo walked back to his sedan. Face what you've earned, or disappear into the same mercy you showed Rose. Samuel chose survival. He climbed into the SUV on trembling legs, flanked by 2 of the 3 men. The enforcer took the driver's seat, silent and immovable. The doors closed with the finality of a coffin lid. Theo watched the SUV pull away, taillights receding into darkness. The 3rd man, younger, sharper dressed, remained behind. What do you want me to do with his truck? He asked. Leave it. Let the police find it here. Let them wonder why Samuel Trevor abandoned his vehicle on a road where his ex-girlfriend nearly died. Theo climbed into his sedan. Sometimes the questions are more useful than the answers. The man nodded and disappeared into a second vehicle Theo hadn't noticed, arrive a dark sedan identical to his own. Within seconds, the road was empty again except for Samuel's abandoned truck. Headlights still burning, driver's door hanging open like a question mark. Theo sat in his car, engine off, darkness pressing against the windows. His phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Keller. Surgery complete. Critical but stable. Next 48 hours will determine recovery. Critical but stable. Medical terminology for not dead yet. Theo closed his eyes, feeling the tension he'd been carrying finally catch up with him. He'd been running on calculated fury for hours, moving pieces across a board only he could see, orchestrating consequences with surgical precision. But now, in the silence, he allowed himself one moment of something that might have been concern. Rose Morgan hadn't asked to be involved in his investigation, hadn't volunteered to become bait for Samuel's panic. She was collateral in a war between criminals, an innocent caught in machinery designed to grind people like her into dust, and yet she'd survived. Despite Samuel's fists, despite the cold, despite the odds stacked against her by geography and timing and the simple cruelty of men who thought violence solved problems, she'd survived because Theo had been watching, because he'd anticipated Samuel's breaking point, because he'd positioned himself exactly where consequence needed to arrive. But that didn't erase his responsibility, didn't change the fact that his investigation had painted a target on Rose's back, didn't absolve him of the role he'd played in bringing her to that frozen road. Another message from Dr. Keller. She's asking for someone. Disoriented but conscious. Needs familiar face. Theo stared at the text. Rose didn't know him. Wouldn't recognize his face or voice. Wouldn't understand why a stranger in expensive clothes sat beside her hospital bed making promises about safety. He typed a reply. Contact her emergency contacts. Family, friends, anyone she trusts. The response came quickly. Already tried. Parents deceased. No siblings. Friends not answering at 4 a.m. You're all she has right now. Theo sat with that information, feeling its weight. Rose Morgan isolated by Samuel's abuse, disconnected from support systems, alone in the world except for the man who'd used her as an unwitting informant. He started his engine. The drive to Dr. Keller's private clinic took 23 minutes. Theo spent them composing explanations that felt inadequate. How do you tell someone they nearly died because you needed evidence? How do you apologize for consequences you'd anticipated but failed to prevent? You don't, Theo realized. You just make sure it never happens again. He pulled into the clinic's underground garage, parked, and walked toward the elevator that would take him to Rose Morgan's room, toward the woman whose survival had saved Samuel Trevor's life, toward the woman Theo had promised to protect. Even if she never understood why, the hallway smelled like antiseptic and something else, copper maybe, or fear. Theo walked past empty rooms with darkened windows, his footsteps echoing against tile floors. Dr. Keller's clinic occupied the 3rd floor of a building that officially housed medical offices and unofficially treated patients who couldn't afford questions. Room 307. Door half open, lights dimmed. Theo paused outside, listening. Steady beeping of monitors. The mechanical whisper of oxygen. Someone breathing shallow, labored, but alive. He pushed the door open. Rose Morgan lay in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small beneath white sheets and medical equipment. Her face was swollen beyond recognition. Purple bruises blooming across her left cheekbone, bandages wrapped around her skull, one eye sealed shut from trauma. An IV drip ran into her arm. Oxygen tubes snaked beneath her nose. Monitors tracked her heartbeat in irregular patterns that made Theo's jaw tighten. This was what Samuel's fists had created. This was the consequence of rage given permission to destroy. Dr. Keller stood beside the bed, reviewing charts. She looked up when Theo entered, exhaustion written across her features. She's stable. For now. Prognosis? Skull fracture, grade 2 concussion, 4 broken ribs, punctured lung, severe hypothermia. Doctor. Keller rattled off injuries like grocery items. I've repaired what I could. The rest depends on her. Whether she fights, whether her body decides survival is worth the effort. Theo moved closer to the bed, studying Rose's battered face. You said she was conscious. Briefly, disoriented. She asked where she was, who hurt her, whether she was safe. Dr. Keller paused. Then she asked if Samuel was coming back. Something cold settled in Theo's chest. Even unconscious, even broken, Rose's first fear was the man who'd put her here. What did you tell her? That she was safe, that no one could reach her here. Dr. Keller closed the chart. I didn't mention you. Didn't know how to explain a stranger orchestrating her protection. Good. Theo pulled a chair beside the bed, Sat down. When she wakes again, I'll explain. Will you tell her the truth? Some of it. Dr. Keller watched him for a long moment. You feel responsible. It wasn't a question. Theo didn't answer. She would have died without your intervention. Dr. Keller continued. The hypothermia alone another 15 minutes, and her core temperature would have dropped past recovery. You saved her life, Smets. I painted the target. Theo's voice was flat. Samuel attacked her because she unknowingly gave me information. Because I manipulated her into becoming useful. Because I needed evidence more than I needed her safety. You couldn't have known he'd snap. I knew what kind of man he was. I knew his history with her. I knew men like Samuel don't let go quietly. Theo leaned forward, elbows on knees. I calculated the risk and decided it was acceptable. I was wrong. The monitors beeped steadily, filling the silence between them. Rose stirred small movement, barely perceptible. Her unbandaged eye fluttered open, unfocused, struggling to make sense of ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights. Her lips moved, trying to form words around the oxygen tubes. Theo stood immediately. Rose, you're safe. You're in a medical facility. Her eye tracked toward his voice, vision clearing slowly. She stared at him, confusion mixing with fear, mixing with something that might have been recognition, though they'd never met. Who? Her voice was barely a whisper, damaged by cold and trauma. My name is Theo Smets. I found you on Route 47. You were hurt. I brought you here. Rose's breathing quickened. The monitors responded, heart rate climbing. Samuel. Isn't coming. Can't come. You're protected. She tried to sit up, failed, gasped at the pain that movement triggered. Theo placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, keeping her still. Don't move. You have broken ribs, punctured lung. Moving will make it worse. Tears leaked from her open eye, tracking down bruised skin. He found me. I tried to leave, and he found me. I know, he said. Rose's voice cracked. He said no one would come, that I'd freeze, that it was my fault for talking too much. He lied. Theo's voice was steady, anchoring. Someone did come. I came, and you didn't freeze. You survived. Rose stared at him, trying to process information through pain and medication and trauma. Why? Why would you? How did you even? Because I was already watching Samuel, following his mistakes, documenting his crimes. You became involved accidentally, and I failed to protect you from the consequences. Theo met her gaze directly. I'm sorry. The apology seemed to surprise her more than anything else. She blinked, fresh tears spilling. You don't even know me. No, but I know what he did to you. And I know you don't deserve to die for being brave enough to leave a man who hurt you. Rose's monitor betrayed her emotional state, heart rate spiking, breath coming faster. Dr. Keller moved to adjust medication, but Theo held up a hand, stopping her. Rose, listen to me. Samuel Trevor is gone. He's answering for everything he's done to you, to others, to people he stole from. He won't touch you again, won't come near you again. That part of your life is over. You can't promise that. Her voice was small, defeated. Men like Samuel don't just go away. They come back. They always come back. Not this time. Theo's tone carried absolute certainty. I've made sure of it. Rose studied his face, the sharp features, the cold eyes that somehow held warmth when they looked at her, the expensive clothes that marked him as someone from a world she'd never touched. Who are you really? Someone who stops men like Samuel. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters right now. Theo stood, preparing to leave. Rest. Heal. When you're stronger, I'll explain everything. Wait. Rose's hand moved weakly, reaching toward him. Don't leave. Please. I don't want to be alone. Theo paused, looking down at her broken body, her terrified eyes, her desperate need for someone to anchor her in a world that had tried to erase her. He sat back down. I'll stay. Rose's good eye closed, relief washing over her battered face. Thank you. The monitors settled into steadier rhythms. Dr. Keller dimmed the lights further, giving them privacy. Theo sat in the chair beside Rose's bed, silent sentinel in the darkness, watching her breathe. She drifted between consciousness and sleep, sometimes murmuring words he couldn't quite hear, sometimes crying softly without waking. Each time her breathing quickened with nightmares. Theo spoke quietly, assurances she probably couldn't process, but that seemed to calm her nonetheless. Hours passed. Dawn approached, turning the windows from black to gray. Rose woke fully as pale light filtered through blinds. She turned her head carefully this time, mindful of injuries, and found Teo still sitting beside her bed. "You stayed," she whispered. "I said I would. Most people don't mean it." "I'm not most people." Rose almost smiled, but the movement pulled at damaged tissue and she winced instead. "I can tell." Theo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, read the message, and some tension left his shoulders. He looked back at Rose. Samuel confessed. Everything. The theft, the assault, all of it. He's in custody. The people he stole from are handling his consequences. Will he go to prison? Eventually, after other debts are paid. Rose absorbed that information silently. Then, "Did you hurt him? For what he did to me?" "No." "Why not?" "Because hurting him wouldn't heal you." Theo stood, straightening his shirt. "Revenge is satisfying for about 60 seconds. Then you're left with the same scars and a new weight to carry. I wanted you to have neither." Rose stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "I don't understand you." "You don't have to. You just have to trust that when I say you're safe, I mean it." "I do." The words surprised them both. Rose looked as confused by her own certainty as Theo felt hearing it. "I don't know why, but I do." Theo nodded once, something that might have been respect crossing his features. "Then rest, heal, rebuild. When you're ready to leave here, I'll make sure you have resources. Apartment. Security. Whatever you need to start over without fear." "Why would you do that?" "Because you deserved protection before, and you deserve support now." He moved toward the door. "And because I failed you once, I won't do it again." "Theo." Rose's voice stopped him at the threshold. "Will I see you again?" He looked back, silhouetted against the hallway light. "Probably not. My world and yours shouldn't intersect more than they already have. But you'll know I'm watching. You'll know if trouble comes. Someone will handle it before it reaches you. That's a lonely way to protect people." "Yes," Theo agreed quietly. "It is." Then he was gone, door closing softly behind him, leaving Rose Morgan alone with her injuries and her monitors, and the strange comfort of knowing a dangerous man had decided she was worth saving. Rose spent 8 days in Dr. Keller's clinic before she was strong enough to walk unassisted. 8 days of surgeries and physical therapy, and nightmares that woke her screaming for help that finally came. 8 days of learning to breathe without pain, to move without agony, to exist without constantly checking doors and windows for Samuel's return. He never came. The first morning she could stand without assistance, Rose shuffled to the window and looked out at the city below gray buildings and traffic, and people moving through their lives with the casual certainty of safety. She'd forgotten what that felt like, forgotten what it meant to move through the world without calculating exits and escape routes. Dr. Keller entered carrying fresh bandages. "You're healing faster than expected. The ribs, especially, you must have good genetics. Or stubbornness." Rose turned from the window. "When can I leave?" "Medically? 3 more days. Practically?" Dr. Keller set the bandages down, expression serious. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Rose's apartment was still in her name, but the thought of returning there to walls Samuel had touched, to spaces he'd occupied, to memories embedded in every corner made her chest tighten. "I don't know." Mr. Smets arranged accommodations. "New apartment, fully furnished, security system installed. He asked me to give you this when you were ready." Dr. Keller handed her an envelope. Inside, keys, an address on the north side, and a handwritten note on expensive paper. "The lease is in your name, rent paid for 2 years, security monitored 24/7. Your belongings have been moved from your old apartment. Bank account established in your name enough for 6 months' living expenses. Use it to heal. Use it to start over. You owe me nothing. T.S." Rose read it twice, trying to reconcile the generosity with the dangerous man who'd sat beside her bed for hours. This is too much. For him, it's barely a gesture. Dr. Keller began changing Rose's bandages with practiced efficiency. Theo Smets operates in a world where money is leverage and power is currency, but occasionally, very occasionally, he uses both for something that looks suspiciously like kindness. "You've known him long? Long enough to understand he's complicated. Dangerous, yes. Criminal, absolutely. But there's a code buried under all that coldness. Lines he won't cross. People he won't abandon once they're under his protection." Rose winced as Dr. Keller probed tender ribs. "Why me? Why does he care what happens to me? Because you got hurt in his war. Because Samuel made you collateral damage in crimes that had nothing to do with you. Theo doesn't tolerate innocent casualties." "Doctor." Keller finished the bandaging. "Also, I think you remind him that not everyone in his world is broken beyond repair, that some people still deserve saving. I don't feel saved. I feel rearranged. Rose looked down at her healing body, at bruises fading from purple to yellow, at scars that would remain long after pain disappeared. Like someone reached into my life, pulled out all the broken pieces, and put them back together in a different order. Is that better or worse than before? Rose considered. Before meant Samuel. Before meant fear masquerading as love, control disguised as care, violence explained away as passion. Before meant disappearing into someone else's definition of who she should be. Better, she admitted quietly. Definitely better. Day 11. Rose was discharged with prescriptions, physical therapy instructions, and Dr. Keller's personal number in case anything feels wrong. A car waited outside black sedan, driver in a suit who introduced himself as James and said nothing else. He drove her to the North Side address, helped carry the few belongings she'd accumulated during recovery, and handed her the keys. Mr. Smets wanted me to tell you the security system is active. Panic button in every room. Someone monitors it constantly. You need anything at all, there's a number programmed into the phone on your kitchen counter. Rose stood in the doorway of her new apartment, overwhelmed. It was beautiful hardwood floors, large windows, furniture that looked expensive but comfortable. Nothing like the cramped studio she'd shared with Samuel, where every surface held memories of arguments and apologies, and the slow erosion of self-worth. This place felt clean, untouched, like possibility made physical. Thank you, she told James. He nodded and left without ceremony. Rose walked through the apartment slowly, cataloging details. Her paintings, the ones she'd thought lost, hung on the walls, professionally framed. Her art supplies arranged in the second bedroom, which had been converted into a studio with perfect northern light. Her books on shelves she didn't own before. Her life, reconstructed by someone who'd paid attention to what mattered. She found the phone James mentioned. One number programmed. She stared at it for a long time before dialing. It rang once. Rose. Theo's voice, immediately recognizable. You moved my paintings. You're an artist. You need your work. You framed them. These frames cost more than I made in 6 months. Art should be presented properly. A pause. Are you settling in? Rose looked around her new apartment, her new life, feeling gratitude and confusion warring inside her chest. Why are you doing this? The apartment, the money, the protection? You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. Theo's voice was quiet. You nearly died because I used you without permission. Because I needed what you knew more than I protected what you were. That debt doesn't disappear because I wrote a check. So this is guilt? This is accountability. Rose sat down on the unfamiliar couch in her unfamiliar apartment. What happened to Samuel? He confessed. Repaid what he stole. Currently serving the rest of his debt in ways that don't concern you. Is he alive? For now. Whether he stays that way depends on choices he makes going forward. Good. Rose surprised herself with the venom in her voice. Then, softer. Will you visit? Check on me? No. The word landed like a door closing. Rose felt something crack in her chest, not heartbreak, but disappointment. Why not? Because my presence in your life is dangerous. Because people who know me become targets for people who hate me. Because you deserve safety more than you deserve my company. Theo exhaled slowly. You're rebuilding, Rose. Building something new from pieces Samuel tried to destroy. Don't let me become another complicated man who dictates your world. You're nothing like him. I'm exactly like him. I just hide it better. A long pause. Be safe, Rose Morgan. Make art. Build a life. Forget the night you almost died and the man who couldn't save you fast enough. Theo. The line went dead. Rose sat holding the phone, tears streaming down her healing face. Not from sadness, but from the strange ache of being protected by someone who refused to stay. Someone who saved her life and then disappeared because he believed his presence would damage what he'd fought to preserve. She understood it, even hated it a little, but she also knew Theo Smets was right. Her new life couldn't include the man who'd orchestrated its beginning. That would be trading one complicated relationship for another. Swapping Samuel's control for Theo's protection, losing herself again in someone else's definition of safety. Rose stood, wiped her eyes, and walked to the studio. Her easel waited. Clean canvas. Fresh paint. She picked up a brush and began creating something new. 4 months of physical therapy taught Rose that healing wasn't linear. Some days she woke without pain, body moving smoothly, scars barely noticeable. Other days, every breath hurt. Every movement reminded her of the night Samuel's fists rewrote her understanding of vulnerability. The therapist said this was normal, said trauma lived in the body long after wounds closed. Rose learned to live with both versions of herself. She painted through the hard days. Bold colors, aggressive brushstrokes, canvases that screamed what she couldn't say aloud. The studio became her sanctuary, the place where rage and grief and relief could coexist without apology. The Copper Gallery called 6 weeks after her discharge. Her old boss, Maria, voice careful and kind. "Rose, honey, I heard about everything. Are you okay?" Rose almost laughed. Was she okay? She was alive, which was more okay than Samuel intended. "I'm managing. Listen, I have a collector asking about your butterfly series, the Metamorphosis paintings. They want to commission new work, 12 pieces, full creative control, budget that'll keep you comfortable for a year. You interested?" Rose looked at the canvas she'd been working on, a woman emerging from darkness, wings forming from wounds. "Yes. I'm interested." The commission gave her purpose beyond survival. She worked 12-hour days, losing herself in paint and possibility, creating art that documented transformation without romanticizing trauma. Each piece told truth. That change was violent, that growth required destruction, that becoming someone new meant mourning who you used to be. The collector loved them, paid triple her asking price, asked for 20 more. Rose Morgan became, against all odds, successful. The panic attacks started 3 months in, sudden, devastating, triggered by nothing and everything. A man's voice raised in anger, footsteps behind her, the sound of truck engines. Her therapist said this was also normal, said hypervigilance was her nervous system trying to prevent future harm by catastrophizing present safety. Rose learned breathing techniques, grounding exercises. The phone number James had given her, which connected to a security team that talked her down from ledges only she could see. She never called Theo. The temptation was there, especially at 3:24, when nightmares woke her and silence felt like drowning. But he'd been clear. His presence was danger disguised as protection. And Rose was done letting men, even well-intentioned ones, define the boundaries of her world. She saved herself instead, one panic attack at a time. One nightmare survived. One day of choosing to keep breathing when breathing felt impossible. Samuel Trevor's name appeared in the news 4 months after that night. Rose saw it while scrolling her phone. Local man dies in custody following confession to multiple crimes. She read the article twice, feeling nothing, then everything, then nothing again. Samuel was dead, not from Theo's hands, but from consequences he'd spent years outrunning. The article mentioned theft, assault, connections to organized crime. It mentioned a woman he'd nearly killed. It didn't mention her name. Theo's influence, she suspected, keeping her privacy protected even in death's paperwork. Rose closed her phone and returned to her painting. That night, she dreamed of snow and silence, and the moment she'd given up, believing nobody was coming. She woke gasping, checking locks, confirming the security system's green light. Then she called her therapist and talked until dawn broke. The gallery opening happened on a Tuesday in spring. Rose stood among her paintings, 24 pieces, documenting transformation from victim to survivor, to something beyond simple categories. Critics called it visceral, unflinching, a testament to feminine resilience. Rose called it exorcism. Maria found her hiding in the corner, overwhelmed by attention. "You okay? Ask me tomorrow." "Fair." Maria squeezed her shoulder. "There's someone here asking for you. Says he's a friend, but wouldn't give his name." Rose's heart jumped. She scanned the crowd, searching for sharp features and cold eyes that sometimes held warmth, but the man approaching wasn't Theo. He was younger, dressed casually, carrying a small package. "Rose Morgan? Yes? Delivery for you. From someone who couldn't attend but wanted you to have this." He handed her the package and disappeared into the crowd before she could ask questions. Rose opened it carefully. Inside, a small card and a photograph. The photograph showed her unconscious on the frozen road, snow falling, darkness pressing close. But in the frame's corner, barely visible, a figure approached. Theo, captured mid-stride, walking toward her through the night. The card read, "You survived because you're stronger than the cold, the violence, and the men who thought they could break you. I was just there to witness it. Proud of what you've built. T.S." Rose stared at the photograph. at the visual proof that someone had come, that she hadn't been abandoned to die alone. That consequence had arrived exactly when it needed to. She tucked the photo into her bag and returned to her gallery opening, to the art she'd made from ashes, to the life she'd built from broken pieces, to the future Samuel never imagined she'd survive to see. That night, alone in her apartment, Rose hung the photograph above her easel, not as reminder of trauma, but as evidence of truth, that the worst night of her life had also been the beginning of becoming someone new. That survival wasn't passive, it was choice, repeated daily, to keep existing despite every reason to quit. She picked up her brush and began a new painting, a woman walking through snow toward light she couldn't see yet, trusting it existed somewhere ahead. Rose Morgan painting her own rescue. Rose Morgan, finally free. Outside her window, the city moved through darkness toward dawn, indifferent to individual suffering, blind to private victories. But in that small apartment on the north side, protected by systems she didn't fully understand and funded by a man she'd never see again, Rose Morgan created art that screamed a truth Samuel Trevor had tried to silence. Some people think the past stays buried, others learn it walks quietly behind them, and a few, the survivors, the fighters, the ones who refuse to disappear, they learn to walk faster. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.